The air in this reclaimed substation hums with ozone and the faint, sweet decay of old nicotine. Dust motes dance in the single neon tube, casting a wound-red glow across hand-labeled vinyl records stacked beside a war surplus transmitter. Outside St. Marie is a 1966 dream of brass and kente, but inside this skull, it's 2036, and reality is just another signal. Ow.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
St. Marie checks in at 86 degrees and sunny. Airflow is northwest at about 7 miles per hour.
Raw exposure for March finalization. Over 400 British citizens faced removal orders in Sweden in Q4 2023, a significant jump from previous quarters. Sweden's strict application of Withdrawal Agreement Article 18.4 now demands applicants prove sufficient resources and comprehensive sickness insurance beyond what the UK offered EU citizens, essentially reinterpreting the reasonable grounds for late applications. This unilateral redefinition of residence rights affects established communities, many of whom have lived and worked in Sweden for decades, believing their status was secured by the withdrawal agreement. The EU Commission's own guidance states that reasonable grounds for late applications should be interpreted broadly. Yet Sweden's line remains firm, leading to an estimated 100 unresolved cases and hundreds of denials.
This echoes historical alien registration acts, where a new border policy suddenly reclassifies long-term residents, turning settled lives into precarious existences overnight. It's the insidious Kafka trap of bureaucracy, where the rules shift mid-game and your past contributions, your very provenance, are deemed insufficient by a new state algorithm. Imagine waking up to find the ground beneath your feet has been declared foreign territory, not because you moved, but because the lines on the map moved around you. This toxic residue of post-Brexit confusion denies basic dignity and the consent once implied by years of residence. It strips away the structural self-worth built through decades of contribution.
Patching in a caller, the boundary keeper. You're on the signal. New tape on deck, 5 years of Taliban rule. Afghan women face. Patching in a caller. Go ahead.
My neighbor, a nurse for 20 years in Gothenburg, just got one of those letters. Her husband is Swedish. Her kids were born there. How can a country just discard decades of contribution like that?
The transmitter pops once, adjusts, holds, ozone drift. The signal is still here. Copy that, bringing it back to the main thread.
That's the core question, caller. The impact is deeply personal, affecting families, careers, and an entire sense of belonging. The affected are long-term British residents in Sweden, their Swedish spouses and children, and the communities they contribute to. One viable alternative is certainly for the UK government to initiate direct diplomatic pressure on Sweden, pushing for a more lenient interpretation aligned with the spirit of the withdrawal agreement and the EU Commission's own guidance. This would involve high-level negotiations to protect citizens' rights rather than leaving it to individual legal battles. However, our chosen next move is to build immediate support through civic mesh connectors. We're leveraging decentralized networks to link affected British citizens with local Swedish legal aid, community groups, and pro bono lawyers. This isn't just about legal defense. It's about forming a collective advocacy network that maps individual distress signals into a powerful, unified voice. By asserting local, collective dignity and demanding acknowledgement of their provenance, we're building a resilient civic architecture that pushes back against arbitrary reclassification and reasserts the structural value of these communities.
Same dossier, new angle, keep the thread tight.
Since August 2021, women and girls have been denied education beyond primary school, banned from most public employment, and restricted from public spaces like parks, gyms, and even public baths. The UNAMA reports over 150 restrictive decrees, effectively creating a gender apartheid. These include mandatory full facial coverings for women in public, a ban on women traveling more than 78 kilometers without a male chaperone, and restrictions on female aid workers. This has led to an estimated 20 million women confined to their homes, with a significant rise in child marriages and domestic violence, while maternal mortality rates are tragically climbing due to lack of female healthcare access.
This is a deliberate cultural demolition, not just policy. It's like watching an ancient library burn, not just books, but the living knowledge, potential, and futures of half a society. The burqa box is their chosen uniform, literally shrinking the world of Afghan women to a confined invisible space, erasing their public face, their agency, and their very existence from civic life. This isn't just a restriction of rights, it's a systematic denial of their humanity, undermining their inner sovereignty and replacing it with a forced, oppressive, external architecture. It's a profound violation of consent and dignity, turning vibrant lives into shadows. The affected are every Afghan woman and girl, their families, and the future social and economic fabric of the nation.
We've got someone.
My sister works with an NGO helping Afghan women. She says they can't even get aid delivered without male chaperones, and girls are being pulled from the few schools still operating in secret. How is anyone supposed to survive?
Your sister's experiences highlight the extreme challenges. The affected are not just the women and girls, but the entire societal infrastructure, which is being deliberately dismantled. One viable alternative often discussed is direct, robust military or humanitarian intervention. However, history shows this path has complex and often unintended outcomes, frequently failing to achieve lasting change and sometimes exacerbating conflict. Our chosen next move is to empower digital Silk Roads, leveraging encrypted satellite internet and school-in-a-box learning platforms. We're directly funding Code for Hope networks that provide secure communication, remote education, and vocational training for Afghan girls and women. This bypasses physical restrictions and rebuilds inner sovereignty despite external oppression. It's about creating an alternative architecture of knowledge and connection, fostering resilience and autonomy by giving women the tools to rebuild their lives and futures, one bite at a time, asserting their dignity and right to self-determination from within.
Yet, as women in Afghanistan face deepening isolation and repression, we're seeing an unsettling counter-narrative. Increased global engagement with the very regime inflicting this harm. This tests our sharp discernment, forcing us to separate toxic residue from architectural signal.
Despite clear human rights violations and the UN's designation of Afghanistan as the world's worst country for women's rights, countries like China, Russia, Iran, and even some Gulf states are increasing diplomatic and economic ties. China, for instance, signed a $540 million oil extraction deal in January 2023 and has invested in mining and infrastructure projects, legitimizing the regime without demanding significant human rights concessions. Russia and Iran have sought security cooperation agreements, viewing the Taliban as a bulwark against regional instability or extremist groups, while Qatar has maintained diplomatic channels and hosted negotiations. This exposure risks normalizing the Taliban's governance and undermines international calls for accountability. The regime has received over $5 billion in international aid since 2021, much of it flowing without strict oversight on how it enables or impedes human rights.
This isn't just diplomacy, it's a dangerous historical echo, a Faustian bargain played on a geopolitical stage, where short-term resource access or regional stability is traded for moral integrity. It's the myth of pragmatism over principle, where the cries of the oppressed become background noise to the clinking of petrodollars and the signing of treaties. The image is clear. A handshake over a veiled woman's silenced protest, turning a blind eye to the architecture of oppression. The affected are the Afghan people, particularly women, whose suffering is implicitly condoned, and the international human rights framework which is being systematically eroded. It's a profound betrayal of the values of consent and dignity, confusing geopolitical maneuvering with genuine progress.
There's a caller on the line.
So, the world is just going to pretend everything's okay. What about accountability for human rights? It feels like we're just letting them get away with it.
Your frustration is valid, caller. The affected are not only the Afghan people, but also the global credibility of human rights advocacy and the international legal order. One strong, viable alternative is a coordinated international diplomatic boycott, coupled with expanded, targeted financial sanctions against individuals within the regime responsible for human rights abuses. This would aim to isolate the Taliban economically and politically until tangible improvements are made, rather than granting them legitimacy. However, our chosen next move is to build a transparency firewall. We're launching Provenance Tracker 2.0, an open-source intelligence platform that maps all international trade deals, diplomatic visits, and financial flows connected to the Taliban. This platform uses myth-busting clear analysis to expose complicit actors, highlight the true beneficiaries of these deals, and provide concrete, verifiable data for advocacy groups, international bodies, and investigative journalists. By making the true cost of these engagements undeniable, we build a resilient civic architecture of accountability that demands consent from the governed and upholds dignity by exposing the hypocrisy of those who trade away human rights for profit or perceived stability.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.